Welcome to Clip Studio, Intermediate Clip Studio Paint. And today we're going to go over how to we're going to go over some tools and stuff. And so this webinar is for those interested in digital art and need help with the creative process to either create their first piece or to further their learning. And we're going to go over the pencil, pen, brush tools, along with the magic wand and the fill bucket and the layer window, so that we can help organize your layers, because that's important. And then we're also going to talk about inspiration and reference images, sketching, line art, coloring, and layer organization. So this is kind of a chart, a flow chart on how you draw, I guess. You get some inspiration and reference images, you sketch, you refine that sketch, you do line art, and then you color it. So for inspiration, inspiration can come from anywhere. I look at Pinterest and I play video games, or just talking with my friends is sometimes the most inspiring thing. Be like, oh my gosh, that's so funny, let me draw that. Or like D&D and stuff like that. You can take pictures or make a Pinterest board with a collection of things. This is actually a little snippet of one of my, a line of Pinterest. So I organize things like, oh, this is my cute themed one, and I think Deco Den is cool, and flowers, and like gothic stuff or insects. And then I keep them all there, and then when I'm like, I really want to draw bugs today, or something, then I go into my Pinterest board and look at bugs so that I have a better idea of how bugs look, so that I can start to draw bugs. And then you can look for inspiration anywhere. Just life, internet, games, social media, movies, videos, friends, and family. References, images, I use Google, just Google Images, or Pinterest. And then I'll organize tutorials or poses. I'll look at fashion stuff or color palettes. Any of these you can use for a reference image to help you understand posing, clothing design, character design, colors more. And then we go on to the sketching process. So it's like a thumbnail, small rough versions of your idea to help you assist with composition flow, and is a quick way to get the idea out before it might leave your brain, because your brain, you can have an idea, but in general, it only holds for about 30 seconds before you start to lose that initial thought process, and your brain decides, I'm gonna think of something else. So thumbnails help get that idea out there really quick. And then the start of the sketch should be rough, might lack in detail to the point of sketching. The point of sketching is to get the idea out there as quick as possible, and then you can go ahead and refine it. So refining, the step might be optional, but I tend to do it, especially since I work in big chunky lines and then I thin them down. So on this top one is my rough of a character sheet that I did. So the lines are all thick and chunky, and I was deciding at the bottom of this coat here where it was going to end. And here on the bottom is a refined, so the top is at a lower opacity so that I could trace over it with more detailed lines. And then I moved on to the line art layer. It's like an outline. Some art doesn't have line art, but we're going to go over art that does have line art. Because that's a whole other can of worms on how you would do that. But this is like, this way is like A, B, C, D, E. So crisp, readable lines are choice. That's I'll talk more about that later. I'm talking about instead of doing like hatchy lines, like just long strokes. And then we go on to coloring. Gives your art a finished look. You can flat color, cell shade, or soft shade. Flat color is just base colors, like this ball right here. Flat cell shading is a hard distinction between light, base, and shadow colors. So on this cell shaded one, we've got the highlight, like an in between, the base color, the start of a shadow, the darkest part of the shadow, and a little bit of reflective light on the bottom here. And then soft shell gives a painterly look, and that's it's like more blended in than a hard distinction. Whatever you go with is entirely up to you. Different types have different moods, obviously, and that's all up to choice. Layer organization. So for this Zay and Rex character sheet, this is what the layers looked like. So the dog has his own folder, and then he has line art on the top, and then each color that was on the dog is separated into separate layers so that if you ever have to quickly change a color, you can go in and just like go on the paint bucket tool and select a color and paint bucket that color in. Or you can turn on, what's it called? You can lock transparency on the layer and then just use the pen tool to color in the different color. And then the emotes and jewels had their own separate layer. And then the like little dragon had, Kobold actually, had its own layer set up the same way as Rex did. I like to keep if there are multiple characters, I like to keep them separate. This really helps if you have, if you're doing like a foreground and then a midground and then a background, so that they're all independent of each other, so that if you need to move something on the foreground, you're not messing with the background and you're not messing with the midground. And having the characters on their own separate layers helps you move them around. Like if you did really nice background line art and then you're like, I really want to move my guy like half an inch to the left, but that means I'll have to erase all this line art or whatever. You don't have to, because your guy's on his own layer and your background's on its own layer. So they work independently from each other. And that's nice. You can think of layers like tracing paper being stacked on top of each other. So normally paper at the bottom won't show through paper at the top if they overlap, but only if they have colors on them. And I can show you what that looks like as soon as we get into Clip Studio. Oh wait, this is the last slide, so we're going into, where's my escape key? There we go. We're going into Clip Studio right now. So over here. My mouse is stuck, I'm sorry. Okay. Let's see here. So first we're gonna go over sketching. So I either like to use the pencil tool. I downloaded the Sucreme pencil brush from the Sucreme pencil brush from the Clip Studio thing. It's a free asset that you can download. It's like really dense, but it's textured, which is really nice for sketching. So different sketching, different tools are going to look different depending on what you use. So this first one was used the Sucreme brush, and I highly suggest just what's the word, experimenting with different tools, because sometimes you might want the pencil where it's kind of gritty but sharp, or you might want the brush where it's a little bit softer but it's easier to kind of like cut out the shapes, because when you're on the brush tool, it's soft, but then you don't feel as like it's set in stone, so you could go in and like cut into it to make something more square like feeling, and then like just kind of hatch out an area, and then yeah, it just, this one's really nice for when you want to when you're shape building, because a lot of drawing is looking at something and then breaking down what the shapes are like, and then either adding on to it, like I added on this triangle part right here, or subtracting parts to give you the shape that you want, the kind of silhouette. So that's why I like the brush tool. You can use the pen tool if you want, but it's usually really opaque, which makes it hard to define what lines you're going to want later, which is why I find the pencil tool and the brush tool are the best for this. And so down here is like a little sketch that I did with the pencil tool. And I'll just put down a base layer. This is what it looks like if I did the pencil tool as line art or the pen tool as line art. Because you can use whatever you want for the line art. It just depends on what kind of, do you want it really textured and kind of gritty, or do you want it kind of sharper? And that's entirely up to you, whatever you like, whatever you want. Yeah. And so after I made this little character for us to look at, he's oh. So I have a folder for him. He's my what is this guy called? A plague doctor? So if you double click on a layer over the like layer 1 or whatever, you can rename it. So I have like the sketch layer right here, which was, I have it at a lower opacity, but at the thickest opacity, I used the paintbrush and I did these like big chunky lines to define what kind of shape he was. And then I refined him so that I had a clearer idea of where the line art would go. And then I went in with the line art. And then the next part would be, and then these were the colors that I decided on. And I'm going to show you how to color him. When, oof. So coloring, I usually go below the line art layer and select a new layer. And then I go to the line art layer. You can set the line art layer as a reference layer. And that's really helpful because when you go to the magic wand tool, you can select from current layer or you can select from reference layer. And if you have from reference layer selected, if you're on this layer 6 that we just created, which is actually probably going to be his coat, we'll do the coat first. We can magic wand tool, even though we're on the coat layer, we can select the area of the coat. All right, I have to have it on. This is add to selection. I had it on new selection, but if you have it on add to selection, then I've got this like little area right here, these crawling ants. They're on this bottom part of the coat, and I can click other places on the coat for it to also be selected. So now I've got everything around here selected, and I can go, I usually like to go to select and then expand selected area and expand by 1 or 2 pixels. I'm going to go with 2 pixels, and this expands the crawling ants out so that it's kind of underneath the line art, so there isn't like a weird tiny white gap, because that sometimes happens and it's usually not a desired effect. So that's why I like to do the expanding layer. And we're going to color him. We're going to click I on your keyboard, and that brings up the eyedropper tools, so you can quickly select that purple color, and then we can click G twice. G first goes to the gradient tool, and then second goes to the paint bucket tool, and we can click down to put that color in, and then Control D to deselect. And then if we look at the coat, we see that I missed a selection here. So we can press W for the wand tool and select that little bit that we missed. And then I see that the selection tool, there's like this tiny gap. It didn't read that it should have selected this, so I'm just gonna paint over it. It's no big deal. And yeah. So that's how you would use the magic wand and the fill bucket tool to quickly put on base colors. Oh, I also see that it did the hands, and we don't want that. We can just, this is the lasso tool, the marquee tool. We can select the area that was colored and then use the eraser tool. I'm using a Cintiq, or you could use just like a pen tablet, and it has the eraser side, and just like flip it over and do that. If you're using like a mouse and keyboard, you can click right here is the eraser tool. And then Control D to deselect. So we've got that. And then a new layer to select. We're going to call this the mask. And we're going to do the same thing with the wand tool. And we're going to go with this cream color. I think I also want to paint his boots that cream color. And then select, expand selected area to 2. And then we're gonna drop the color in. And then Control D to deselect a new layer. And we're going to magic wand. We're gonna magic wand his pants and his hand. And this hand, because I have this gap right here, it's reading that it's all one area. So we're going to go to close gap and then do large. And that stops it. And we're going to color this a gray color, like he's got gloves on. And the G. Oh, I forgot to expand selected area. Control Z is undo. And we'll redo that. And then our last color is this red. And new layer. W for the wand tool. And we're going to color the eyes and the buttons. Select, expand selected area to, and G twice to put down that red color. And now we have flat colors. I didn't name these layers, so I can double click. This one was the red. Red. And this one was the gray. So we've got those named now. So we had our sketch, we refined it, we put the coat, mask, the gray, red, and line art layers. And then these were our sample colors. And that's all inside this folder. If I were to, these were my sketches that I was showing you earlier. These all show on top of the Plague Doctor. So yeah, and this is the starting stream stuff. So I can like move around this character and it's always going to be opaque over my Plague Doctor because it's reading that there are no, the character is a not transparent pixel, and then everything outside of the character is a transparent pixel. And then if you turn it off, it disappears. Or if you move the if you hold and click and hold and then move down, you can move this character behind the Plague Doctor now. And you can click an entire folder to move the entire set, or you can this little caret and go down to look at all of the individual layers, and you can move those too. Control Z if you accidentally do that and you didn't want to. And now let's talk about, are there any questions so far? I don't see any.
So far, there's none. Not in Facebook.
Okay. I'm gonna turn off this character, and then we'll talk about shading. So shading is the bane of my existence, but I'm figuring it out, and there's always a learning curve. So I usually just start with the face because the face is the most important thing because that's what draws the eye first, is another face. So this is the red layer, and I like to make a new layer on top of it, and I like to click, where is it? Clip to layer below. And what this does is I could scribble all over the place, and it will only color inside the areas of red. So when I'm doing color, so right now we're on the red color. I like to do what's called a hue shift, which is if it's a cold shadow, you move more towards blue, and then a darker shade and color. And see, I can scribble all in here. If I turn off this, you can see where I actually drew, but turning it on will create that mask again. I didn't like that. I think I hue shifted too much. So like this is gonna be the pupil, and then there's like a bit of a shadow. And then to get the lighter color, you go more towards warm, and then you go lighter. And so I'm gonna do like that. And then I usually like to put white right on top of to make it like extra shiny looking. But whatever you guys want to do will work. It's all experimentation, really. So we did the eye, and then we're gonna do a little bit of shading on the buttons. I'm imagining that the light source is coming from this way, the upper right. So that's why the shading is going on this side of the hearts, plus a little bit on this top side. And then this pink color, I kind of imagine a button would have a bit of a rough texture, so I'm gonna use the pencil brush instead. I'm using the real pencil. And so when we zoom out, it's a little bit textured, but not super noticeable from far away. And we can actually do that with the other side too. And then, so that's shading on the red layer. Gray, more towards blue, and kind of darker, more saturated in the shading. Oops. I forgot to make a new layer and then add clipping. And then we add the shading. I just kind of gave him ball hands because I don't know, Animal Crossing is cute and that's what I've been thinking about. And so even though the light's coming from this upper left, he's got this coat on. So there's actually probably going to be some shadow down here too. And then we go back to the original color and we kind of want to go more towards the light, a lighter gray. I kind of like that more than the first thing I did. Yeah. And then the mask. The mask is like a tan color, and then you're like, okay, that's kind of confusing. Am I going more towards orange, or should I go more towards yellow to get that shading? Let's try yellow first because I don't actually know. I think that looks good. So a new layer and clip at layer below. And we're gonna shade this underside of the mask. And then we'll shade this like there's a little lip around it. And no, I don't like that. Okay, so say, yeah, this is fine or whatever. But what if we did want to go that other way? What would that look like? So we can hold this layer 8 down and drag it to the new layer button, and that will create a copy of the layer. And we can turn on lock transparent pixels, and we're gonna reselect this base color and try going towards the other side. And then we'll recolor to see what that looks like. Probably a bit darker. And then you can switch back and forth between the two. He's a plague doctor, so I think this like more greenish kind of sickly hue is better. So the initial thought was right. And then we can go on to highlight, which is pretty much basically white, and turn off the transparent pixels. Yeah, he's looking cute. And then, so the mask is colored, and then the coat. So more towards blue, darker, more saturated. And this undercoat is definitely going to be darker than, and then this side. And then this area that's on the inside of his hood. Nah. And that's a really good reason to keep a Clip Studio, or not Clip Studio, another layer on the shading on it, a separate layer, so that you can mess around on how the lighting goes without interfering with the base color that you put down. I think that's good enough. We don't want to go too complex on this little dude. And then you shift. Plague doctors coated their jackets in like wax, so I imagine it'd be like kind of like a rubbery raincoat. Yeah. And that was it, except I forgot to do his boots. This one. Okay, so that's kind of how you do that. If you had decided that you wanted to now try doing a soft shade, you can click the blur. I usually like to do blur by fiber. And then, let's see, we'll do the coat because it's the largest area. We could blur out this edge. A lot of effective painting is keeping some sides blurred and some sides hard edge. That gives you a kind of more realistic effect. When you're painting. So that's kind of this like little hood areas where I attempted to do some blending. But I think because this style is so simple, it would be better off not painterly. And let's see, line art, coloring, layer externization. Oh yeah, okay, so I didn't, for this last part, I didn't really name these layers, but if it's red, then I usually know that the layer right above it that's being clipped is red shading, gray shading, if I knew how to spell. We can delete this layer 8 copy because that was the mask that we didn't, mask color that we didn't use. And then let's go over saving. So there are a couple different ways to save this. Color. Okay, so we can do file, save as if it's your first time saving. And we'll go to I'll just go to this one. And this is a Clip Studio format. And so that's your working if you ever want to like come back in and edit it again. And then you can also export it as a single layer. You can do JPEG, which is a lossy format. So the more you open it, the blurry it'll get, more blurry it'll get over time. A PNG is a lossless file type, and it does allow for transparency. So if we turn off this paper tool, you'll be left with no background. And we can file, export single layer PNG as the plague doc, and we can save. It'll open this menu, and we can preview the rendering result output if you want. I usually have that turned off. I usually keep this on text because it doesn't matter. Auto detect, we keep all of that the same. So right now I have this scale ratio from original. I'll put it back at 100%. which is a 5 by 6 inch canvas at 300 DPI, and it's for illustration. We click OK. And then if I go into, hold on. If I go into my folder and I open my PNG file, he doesn't have a background. Let's see. So yeah, there's no background on him. And that's nice. Is there any other tools anybody wants me to go over or has questions about coloring or sketching?
Yeah, for people watching on Facebook, but it looks like no one has commented so far. But is there a way for people to find a guide on this stuff besides watching, like maybe the recording later? Also, watchers, did not know the recording of this webinar will be on our YouTube this week, later on this week. Definitely check that out. But back to that, is there like a guide that people can look at just in case they get lost suddenly?
Yeah, so I don't personally make a guide, but if we go to when you initially start Clip Studio, it opens this launcher, right? And there is an essential tutorials, which will it's just going to load the Clip Studio website, but inside this launcher. It's taking a while. Here we go. So these are some tutorials. This one, making your first illustration, I think goes over really well on like how you create lines and sketching. And it highlights the tools and stuff, and it explains what layers are. There's a lot of these, and so these are official Clip Studio Paint tutorials, but then, and they've got all sorts of them. There's for character art, comics, animation, traditional style, concept art, design, how to use the functions, and all this sort of stuff. But yeah, I like these ones that are from Clip Studio. This one teaches you how to adjust the brushes, because when you're in Clip Studio and you are looking at the brushes, they give you a lot of options. So if I'm on like the brush tool and I'm on the dense watercolor, there are all these stuff, and you're like, what does it even do? So there's like the brush size, which is set by pen pressure, so it'll get thicker and darker the harder I press. And even though my bounding ring is like super big, since it's set to pen pressure and I'm not pressing very hard, it doesn't get that big. The amount of paint, you can lessen the amount of paint that's on the brush, so there isn't as much color that comes down. The density of paint you can also change to, which will further decrease that, uh, which gives you the ability to like layer more effectively. But I like to keep it, if you ever mess these up, you can always reset back to default, uh, because sometimes you might not exactly get what you want. Um, some of these I like never touch because I don't find them that useful. But if you ever, dense watercolor is my favorite. If you ever go in, you can look even further at the tools. So there's like a lot of options in here. And that's what that tutorial is for, to teach you how to get what you want. That's a pretty good looking apple. Yeah, I guess I can go over recent. Nope, never mind. Where's my this documents, illustrations, 2020. Okay. So this one is a good one where layering was really important. I have a flattened image on top, but I'll turn that off. So the foreground, there's snow at the bottom here. And then there's this character is on its own layer, and this character is on its own layer. And I didn't even bother rendering the trees that were behind them. And then the background. The background has several layers to it as well, where it's like the snow that they're standing on, and then just like the layers of snow as it gradually gets back, and the trees. For the background, I didn't spend too much time on it since it wasn't the most essential part of the illustration. So I did shading and all that on the same layer, just by locking the transparency pixels. But if you're just starting out, I wouldn't recommend that because that gets really frustrating, because for a while that's what I did. So yeah, each of these layers has some stuff to it. And when you put them all together, they make what you want. That's all I have. If yeah, that's all I got.
Okay, thank you everyone for watching. Again, you can watch this video on YouTube or on our Facebook right now. It's going to be saved there if you want to watch it again. But we'll be having our YouTube page later. Thank you for everyone and have a good night.